I don't know how much you've heard of the previous speakers.
I've heard a lot.
Well, we started off with Rick Benecke pointing out that New York is home to over 1,300 nonprofit cultural institutions, thousands of artists. New York City nonprofit culture attracts 98 million visitors to over 100,000 events like exhibitions and performances. It attracts 23.8 million tourists to New York, generates an estimated $8.1 billion a year, which is a major contribution to the city's economy, generates over 120,000 jobs, which stimulates the economy, and yet it receives less than 1% of the overall city expense budget.
Well, I think it's outrageous that we are the arts and culture capital of the world, and we're not funding that area adequately. I mean, I just think it's misplaced priorities. I was a school teacher for 11 years, so I was actually in the classroom in the New York City public schools, and I've watched the erosion of spending on arts and music and physical education, things that are not frills. I consider art education not a frill. It's definitely connected to educating the whole child. It's not something that should be treated as a lark. And for example, principals right now are able to use money that's allocated for the arts. Even though it's inadequate, they're able to divert it to other areas, which I think is wrong. And we shouldn't, I mean, I believe principals should have flexibility in terms of running their schools, but I don't think they should be able to divert the entire budget to other areas. So
you would make the supplementary arts funding actually be supplementary arts
directed to arts, not giving principals flexibility. And I don't want to blame simply the principals. I think that we've gotten to a stage in our education system where we're teaching to the test. A lot of pressures on principals, teachers, and students with this high-risk testing process that we're involved in. And so principals throw everything at teaching to the test, and you divert the areas that the kids need, like art, music, physical education. So I would certainly fund it from the expense budget at a 1% rate. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think in the long run, it's going to produce a more holistic child.
Well, this is a two-pronged discussion. We're talking about funding for the schools, which has been in serious decline, and funding for nonprofit arts institutions. There is a certain amount of synergy there because these arts organizations serve as crucial tools for learning both within and beyond the schools. You can only imagine how much more could be done if the city supported the theater companies, the dance companies, the smaller arts institutions. And we are actually spending 1/4% of the city budget on nonprofit cultural organizations, despite the fact that New York is the art center of the world.
Once again, it's misplaced priority, and you're right, there's a synergy between the community-based organizations and the schools. I mean, our young people go into the museums, art studios, and you can work together, and I would direct my chancellor to make this a priority, to create that synergy with the Department of Cultural Affairs. So we've got so many assets here in the city and the cultural area and the arts area, that our kids should be able to access that and continue to keep our cultural institutions thriving, because we're producing more literate young people and more holistic young people who would also become citizens who would value the arts, and it just would generate itself over time.
Well,
so
polls indicate that the public would want to see more support for the arts. Can we have some kind of an arts tax that might be added on to actually support the arts institutions?
I wouldn't go as far as an arts tax, but I can tell you under an Albanese administration, we would provide adequate funding. The 1% number makes a lot of sense from the expense budget, which would take care of a lot of the needs that we have and would support the arts. And also my plan to make sure that the principals direct the money towards arts education would also be in place. And I've got a vehicle for paying for it as well.
Which is?
Well, I spent the last 15 years in finance, and I know a lot about pension plans, and the New York City pension plan is a clunker. It's really, and it has to be modernized. For example, the Toronto system performs 3% better consistently than the New York City system because they've modernized their plan. If the New York City pension system functioned as well or performed as well as the Toronto system, the city would save about $2.5 billion a year. Because the city contributed $8 billion last year to the pension plan. If it performed 3% better, it would be about $2.5 billion, which we could use to balance the budget and provide services like arts education. What I will do is work with the labor unions because I need their permission to reform and modernize the plan. And in exchange for a pay raise, I would want them to come forward and to give me the flexibility to do that. And also, I think George McDonald hit on something as well. I think our health care bill for the city is astronomical. I don't support what George is saying, but I do support streamlining it. For example, there are 84 different supplementary health care plans that the unions have. I would ask the unions to merge them into one, and then we could leverage that by dealing with the pharmaceutical industry and with other healthcare providers to bring down the cost and also save the city money so we can provide services. And the other issue, of course, is we give away a lot of money in terms of tax breaks to developers sometimes that don't need them. I'm not against tax breaks, but if they create jobs and they create development where we need those developments, we have a history of giving away largesse to campaign contributors. I've drawn a very bright line in my campaign. I'm not accepting money from people who do business with the city. I'm not accepting money from developers or lobbyists because if you get there, only favors all over town, all the rhetoric that we mount in these campaigns will not come to fruition. So I want to make decisions on the merits. And we have a $70 billion budget. I think it's tragic that we don't spend. Our priorities are not directed towards services that the city really needs, and we can balance the budget and provide valuable services.
The city has given NBC 2 tax breaks and incentives over the last 15 years. Maybe it's because NBC is doing so poorly in the ratings that they need the help, but I mean, NBC? Is it because we're afraid they're going to move to New Jersey?
Those are all things we have to look at. Look, New York City is the greatest city in the world, and part of the reason is because education, arts, and culture are capital of the world, and people want to do business here. They want to come to New York City. We don't have to give away the store. But once again, if you look at the campaign filings of the candidates, you'll see why the store is given away, because these contributions, some of the candidates have over $1 million from the real estate industry. They're not going to be able to make decisions on the merits and development. So you've got to look at that when you're evaluating the candidates. And we've talked a lot about education, and it's my top priority. It's my passion. I did it for 11 years. I came here as an immigrant at the age of 8, and it was the public schools, the libraries, the sports programs that elevated my family from the working class to the middle class. My mother was a garment worker, so I believe in the city elevates people, and we have to provide the services to do that. But we're missing the boat when it comes to education. It's clear now, neurologists and psychologists have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that many of our young people come into our schools at 4 or 5 years old, way behind. And the reason, and many of them never catch up. I mean, the average middle-class kid comes into a school building at 4 years old knowing 1,400 words. Your average from a poor community knows about 300 words. The reason is, it's not an IQ issue. It's poverty. Poverty causes stress. Stress causes developmental issues. So I want to set up pediatric wellness centers in low-income communities around the city where we start working with parents, doctors, and teachers working together in a multidisciplinary approach. So our kids come into our school building on an even keel. I want to merge all of our early childhood programs into a department of early education, so that we really focus on that 0 to 3 age. I think it's political malpractice not to address this, because now we know that this is a major cause of a lot of issues. Kids get referred to special education. They wind up in our criminal justice system simply because of these issues, and we've got to address it. So I've got a plan. My education plan is clear. It's the cornerstone of my policy to set up 5 pediatric wellness centers, and one in each borough. Track those kids, and I'd like to do it with some private funding to begin with, and then we can show that it's successful and begin to really address that, because the elephant in the room when it comes to our failing schools is poverty, and if you don't address that, if you don't address those factors that drive these kids into unfortunate circumstances early on, I think it's malpractice. So I want to address it, and I'm going to do it as mayor.
As a cultural consumer, resident citizen in the city of New York, what do you love? What are you most passionate about seeing, doing, experiencing culturally?
Well, I love going to the theater. I mean, it's just it's great. We live in the in the theater center of the world, so that's something that I really love. I mean, one of the things that I noticed when I first came to the United States was I came on the Christopher Columbus. It was I was 8 years old. It was we came into the harbor, and I was on the deck, and I saw the Statue of Liberty, and it was just I didn't know what it meant, what it signified at that, but it was such an awesome experience, and it's all due to architecture, and that had a real impact on me. So without art and without culture, we're really not a great civilization. So we have to foster it, and it's not even that expensive to do it.
And you actually came on a boat.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, sometimes people make fun of, you came here on a boat. I really came here on a boat.
Yeah.
You're off the boat. Yes, I was off the boat. Christopher, in those days, I came we came here in 1958, and it was the Italian line, Christopher Columbus, that took us across the water in 7 days. And I got seasick, by the way, as well.
Sal Albanese, thank you very much.
Thank you.